All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to ClearTalk. Um, going off of the Trump um, thing, where we have him referring to, you know, uh, the abortion issue in Florida, where he's saying he doesn't agree with the 6 weeks thing and IVF thing about free. He's really trying to rebrand himself, like I said, on that whole issue. And it's pretty much because I feel like abortion is going to be a big issue for this election. Um, it has been the one thing that has been steady, I think, for the Democratic side in support. Um, there's more confidence in polls for Kamala um, being better on the issue than Trump. I think I saw the poll where it was like 47% of people feel that have confidence in her with the abortion issue, where versus Trump was like at um, I think 17 or maybe 23, somewhere around in there. It was pretty low in comparison. So it's a major. I think it's going to be a major issue for this campaign. So I wanted to talk about my thoughts on the whole thing politically, and then also kind of just morally to a degree, and it might even touch a little bit on the religious side of it. So yeah, that's what I want to talk about in this video. So if you like this content, again, thank you. Consider subscribing. It helps me out. It's free for you. And like, share, comment, all that good stuff. What you think about this topic? What do you think about the whole abortion issue? Where do you lie on the issue? That'd be great for conversation. I think get people talking, expressing their daily. Maybe we can even talk and work out. See each other's sides to some degree. Anyways, yeah, thank you, and let's get to it. So, abortion. Abortion has been a big topic. I think probably election after election for a while. Um, it is a big topic politically, the big topic spiritually, religiously. Um, you've got your anti uh, anti-abortion, pro-life, pro-choice, um, dynamics. Um, I when This has been something that has been a movement going on for decades, and it's just a constant push. You had Roe versus Wade uh, back um, uh, back in the was it 50s, 70s? I can't remember. One or the other. I can't remember what the date was, year was. But since when it was put into implemented in place, it was basically I want it was by trimester. So like uh, first trimester was, which I think roughly uh, on average adds up around 23 weeks, 22, 23 weeks, somewhere around there, maybe, or 25 maybe at best. It's like first trimester, uh, no restrictions on it on like a federal level. Like there was no restrictions. No state could put restrictions on abortion. And then the second trimester, it was more of a based on kind of like the between you and your doctor. If it's a medical issue that uh, where restrictions or whatever around that. Medical issues could be, uh, a reason for having one, whether it's the life of the baby, life of the mother, or something like that. And then, of course, third trimester was, and that was basically that was even somewhat like in charge state by state, on how they regulated that. Some regulations or whatever, some states were a little bit harsher, some states were not quite so harsh, even in that period. And then, of course, third trimester, it was solely, it pretty much was solely based on the states, and most states restricted it, um, in any type of third trimester, unless it was like severely, um, uh, like what few states did allow one, it had to be, most of it was like, pretty much a hardcore medical reason for it. Um, yeah, that was pretty much the idea. At 23, 25, whatever, the first trimester area, it was 22, 22, 23, somewhere around there, whatever. Um, there was no restrictions. It was allowed. Every state could do it. Um, and then you had, I think, around in somewhere in the 90s, 92, 93, somewhere around in there, you had another, uh, or maybe a little bit later, you had another kind of thing go through, um, ruling that adjusted that a little bit. I think it pulled it more towards around the 20 mark, 21 week mark, like a hardcore mark, um, uh, outside of just the first trimester thing. So it kind of backed it up for, a week, a couple weeks from Roe versus Wade. But ultimately, it was still pretty much almost the same, where there was no restrictions in the first month. Well, okay, so now we have, and that was popular. That was actually the very popular. Even before, and it had grown in popularity even over the years. When it first happened, it was popular to some degree. I think there was probably some fluctuation in it, in its popularity throughout the 80s and 90s. But here, throughout the early 2000s, when it was continuously gaining popularity, especially when you were the more, pro-life activists were pushing and pushing and pushing for legislation and stuff, state to state or even on the federal level. There seemed to be more and more popularity towards it, gaining, higher and higher percentage of people accepting it and feeling like it was the right way to go. But we had Trump put in some, assignments to the Supreme Court, and they eventually decided to, strike it and bring down Roe. Uh, so now it is solely to the states, all the way across the board. A state can either completely ban it, or, they can let it be, all the way, whatever, depending upon, whatever the, majority vote for that state. Um, it's a lot of states already had rules on the board, like, some outstanding rules from hundreds of years ago, that in some degree went into place, or was allowed to go into place. Very restrictive rules. So you have quite a few states now that have very strict anti-abortion. Even, like I said, for like Florida, down to 6 weeks. Um, there is a lot of the others are around the 15-week mark. Uh, and then, but you've got different legislations, the activists are still pushing for, less and less and less. But on the federal, on the federal line right now, politically, I'm speaking solely politically right now. It's, to the states. So the states, uh, decide based on their current laws, or based on any kind of new law or bill that they are wanting to pass or have passed. But this has caused a ripple effect throughout the whole medical field. In any kind of thing revolving around, um, any kind of health issue, um, or condition for the baby, the mother, and everything else. Has put everything in this peril where, doctors are, uncertain, especially by law and everything else for their states, uncertain in many cases of whether or not they can do, because there's a lot of a lot of things that happen that can technically be considered an abortionary act, um, due to some type of health issue or whatever, having to, uh, whether it's on the health of the mother, condition of the mother, or even the child. There's been a lot of things in that, in those cases like this where, doctors have, even with them being maybe within the time realm of that state's, like, period, maybe it's the 15 weeks or whatever, it may be within that realm, but they're still uncertain about doing procedures or anything like that that even would remotely be considered that, because they, of scrutiny or, attacks and whatnot. I mean, so it's just caused this whole big ripple effect throughout the medical community in a lot of states, particularly red states, where there's just uncertainty, and you have a lot of, doctors that just won't, they just will straight up not even attempt or even try to, uh, consider what they previously would have considered doing in a certain situation, because of these laws and just obscurity in the laws, uh, of what they can and can't do. So it's just caused a whole bunch of, problems and issues, and a lot of mothers, uh, having serious issues happen to where, their, condition or something, and it's putting them at risk, and they're going to the up to the point of, like, you know almost dying before something is even allowed, to happen. There's so much proof having to be made, as to whether or not a procedure can be done in certain situations and whatnot. I mean, it's just a whole big thing, a whole issue. And it's just made it difficult for medical professionals to make decisions on their patients, um, in this situation. And that's just for, like, medical things. Then you have your argument for other conditions outside of that, for, your race, I mean, rape, um, incest and stuff like that, that, where it's and whether those are being accepted as exceptions to these laws and rules. Um, and this has been an issue, uh, politically and even medically, or personally, for a lot of individuals. Um, Speaking locally, we just recently, at the beginning of this month, actually, August, July, into July, had reporting. I live in Mississippi, and there was this young lady, um, here in Mississippi, up in the Delta region, um, who, uh, was attacked outside of her house. She was playing, roughly about 11 years old at the time, playing outside her house just like she normally does. And this random individual came out of nowhere, uh, into her yard, pulled her, to, like, the side of the house or somewhere, like, to where they couldn't be seen, and he raped her. Uh, she did not know what was happening. She, according to, interviews with the mother and stuff like that, had not really had the conversation about, uh, that whole thing. Now you could, question a lot of kids at these ages now. They kind of learn it on their own to some degree already, before a lot of times parents make a, decision to talk with their kids or whatnot. But it seemed very much like she, either did not really know what was going on, or if she did, it was not how she had been told or thought it would be, or like, it put her in this very shocked, after shock state where she wasn't talking about it. She was being very, uh, in her home, like, she didn't want to leave the house. She didn't want to go outside and play. She didn't, and the mother knew something was going on, but it took a while for her to even get, information out of her about what had happened. Um, but ultimately, by the time they did figure it out, um, she was already around the 15-week mark, when they figured out that something had happened, and they went and had her checked, and she was pregnant. It was somewhere around 13, 14-week mark, I think, is when they figured that out. But not knowing Mississippi laws and stuff like that, they were unsure about trying to, uh, have something done about it at that point. Not to mention the exceptionary thing, still, there's a process to that. So even by the time they were to know, try to get it done with an exception, more or less, it was going to be past the date of acceptance, anyways. They were offered and told that, the closest possible, place that they could go and have an abortion done was in Chicago. And they, you know, although they considered it, they didn't really have the time or funds to go all the way to Chicago to have a procedure done. So now she is a, 13-year-old, with a child. She was pregnant, um, at 12 years old. Um, she basically, they kind of removed her from school, or she was doing more like, from home work. They were like, did a deal with the school area or something like that, to, she was allowed to work from home on her schoolwork, and she, uh, to get, I guess, through the rest of her school year, to try to limit, they were worried about people finding out, and the scrutiny and the everything else that they would get, from that, her being so young. And so, and now she has had the baby. Um, it's only, I guess, a few weeks or a few months old now. Uh, but she, and she's, I guess, 13 at this point now, or about to be 13 or something, with a child, because, you know, of, and they, have not been able to find the person that did it. The authorities, were reluctant to even work with them at first, and still don't seem to be really helping that much in trying to find out. So you have this whole situation where, if the road was still intact, this wouldn't even, as far as like, there would have been certainty that she could have gotten, an abortion if she needed to and wanted to. And in that kind of case, you most certainly would have. I There's no way in the world that I would have wanted, my 12-year-old to be forced to have a child of somebody just random, and sexually assaulted her, raped her. Like, that's crazy to have to deal with that. And uh, a lot of pro-life argument there is that, well, it's not the child's fault, and there's, so many avenues that, the child could go. Okay, yeah, but you need to realize, yes, the child could be put up for adoption, all those kind of things, and true enough, yes, but that child at some point still would have to reconcile with how they were brought into this world, and the emotional state of that, or just the emotional state of having to deal with the fact that they're adopted, or or was put into you know the uh, uh, system or whatnot, you know, if that were the case, or just or even if they did decide to, like they did, to carry on with it, that they, um, had to be brought up by a teenage mother or grandparents. It's there's a whole life of scrutiny and things that would be brought upon them, stress and everything that would be brought upon them in living in that. Yeah, they have life, and sometimes, you never, yes, there, you can look at all the positives that, yeah, they could still live perfectly fine and grow up perfectly fine and possibly be treated perfectly fine. And, if they have all the right conditions and the right setup and the right people around them, and yeah, if everything goes hunky dory, true, they could live and be prosperous and defy the odds. But you also have to look at the opposite of that and realize that reality is that there is an exact opposite of that, where they potentially could go down and have the worst conditions possible forced on them. And you have to reconcile with that, and that's what a parent would have to do, deciding what's best for, that's what the whole role of being a parent is deciding what's best for their child life, or even in this, in this type of case we're talking about, an abortion, a potential child's life, and how they want to be brought into the world, and whether it's, in their best interest to be brought into the world. I don't understand how that is not a parental understanding or right to make that decision, and why people feel like they should make the decision for people to force them to have kids. Um, so clearly, me stating about this, I think I'm pretty much giving myself away that I am pro-choice. Um, just on logic, in reality of the world, um, and just the, like, rights that a parent should have in, uh, what they feel best for their child. Now, you always have these arguments about, don't tell me how to raise my kid and all this kind of stuff, but yet you want to tell somebody whether to have a kid or not. Um, it's just like, it's just, you can't have everything your way. Um, whether you like it or not, whether you like the idea of somebody, you know, deciding not to have their child, it's not your right to tell them that they can't decide that. It's certainly not the right of a politician to have to say that they can't do that. That should be something that's solely between them and their medical profession, that they decide to, you know, engage with, or, uh, work out, whatever the issue that is. Whether they're choosing to not have the child because of a personal reason or a medical reason or whatever. Um, Now, oftentimes the argument is that, well, you just have people out here doing whatever they want, and then when they're getting pregnant over and over and over again, and just having just deleting the babies, they're killing the babies, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, you have a small percentage of the population, a very small percentage of the population that might be abusing it. That was never an argument that could not be had. Yes, there were just like there's always a small percent of the population that abuses everything. that's not an argument. There's a part that abuse healthcare, that abuse, you know, uh, economic things, whether it be uh, governmental assistance things, programs, or whatever the case. Or there's always somebody that's going to try to take advantage of something, even on the other end of the scale. Wealthy, rich people taking advantage of the tax, loopholes and everything, so that they don't have to pay taxes. There's always somebody that is trying to take advantage, and there's a small percentage of the population that does it. But that's not an argument against doing the things that protect people or give people rights or allow for someone to make a decision for themselves that would better themselves and the people around them. Uh, so you just have to kind of accept the fact that there are going to be a small percentage, usually only 1, maybe 2% of the population, that takes advantage of stuff. But you can't use that as an argument to just completely refuse things to happen or refuse things to be or to argue against something. Otherwise, you're going to be arguing against everything. You know. Um, so, uh, yes, I am pro-choice clearly. Just on a political stand, I do not agree. I would rather see Roe put back in place. Uh, I would like to see it codified to allow for people to make their own decisions. I feel like um, the 20, 21, 22 week area period is perfectly fine. After that, I think abortion is perfectly fine. I do urge people to make the decision as soon as possible. Like, I understand, the sooner the better, but like, I don't see where, and even after that point, if there's a medical condition that where the child is at danger, the mother's at danger, there should be no problem with a doctor and a parent making decision, what's best for them and the baby and the whole situation, like whatever the case is. Um, and you know, yeah, to a certain point, it probably shouldn't be done. No doubt. Um, the argument that people are allowing it to happen even after they're born, that's a bunch of BS. That is straight lies. Now, you may have had a situation where a child was born, like, say, premature or something like that, like, uh, and had a condition where they were going to die no matter what, like within hours or whatever. I mean, there may have been, I don't know, possibly a case or so where it was assisted or allowed. Like, if that is an argument for somebody killing a baby after the case, I mean, I guess you can say that that could have happened. But just literally a baby being born and the mother being like, I don't want it, let's abort it right now. Let's kill it right now. That is illegal and that is not happening. So that is just straight lies. Um, the majority of abortions, like 90 something percent of abortions, were done within the first trimester. We're done within the first 20 weeks. So acting like this is some widespread issue where full ass grown babies in a womb are being aborted over and over and over again is not happening. For starters, and it certainly isn't happening after the fact. Uh, Now, you have your arguments religiously, where uh, it is thought that as soon as the act is done, um, and the seed has been given that it is a baby. That from that moment, the moment of conception, it is a baby. It has a soul, and that soul needs to be preserved. And this is biblical. This is, God's, perfect design, and it should not be killed. There should be a complete ban on abortion. It should never happen. The Bible's against it. Blah 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 blah. I can show you clear places in the Bible where that is not true. Outside of the fact that in the Bible there are instance after instance after instance of God Himself, Yahweh, or however you want to, claim it, commanded His people, or commanded a person, or whatever, a group, to kill a whole other group, from man, woman, child, everything, animals, completely eradicate a whole group of people viciously. So clearly, now you can say, okay, yeah, but that's God making that decision. Okay, but still, apparently God doesn't have a problem with babies dying. I'm pretty sure some of these women that were killed were probably pregnant. Or they were, if they weren't killed, they were taken into slavery a lot of times, forced, to do things or whatnot. So, but uh, there's the flood, right? The famous story, the flood narrative. Now, outside of the fact that it's thought to be unique and it's not. But there's again, God commanded for the whole, earth apparently to be eradicated, all of humankind outside of Noah and his family, who was, considered to be above the fray, above that, act, blessed, noble enough to live. And He eradicated everybody else. You think there wasn't mothers that were pregnant that were obliterated by the flood? Okay, well, fine. We're still sticking on the fact that, God commanded this. It was His choice to kill them. Fine. But there is even in the Bible a story, a procedure given, instructions on how to actually do an abortion in the Bible, where if the man thought that his wife or whatever had committed adultery, whether they had proof or not, he could have them taken to this, doctor or whatever, a medical person, or whatever the case, and this solution was made. It was instructions on how to make it and take it, that would, if the wife or whatever was pregnant, she would literally have a miscarriage or an abortion. Would have a miscarriage. And would, the solution would cause her to release her, release everything. Or if she, wasn't pregnant, she hadn't been, she would be, I probably would have a stomach ache, but she wouldn't be, she wouldn't be having an abortion because she wasn't pregnant. So this was a procedure. It was directed and instructions given on how to have this done, how to, to force an abortion. And it was, instructions given by God. Okay, wait a minute. We're still talking about God then. Okay, yeah, you can continue to make that argument, but it still stands that the Bible has instructions on how to have an abortion. There's children and babies being killed all throughout the Old Testament, in the Bible. So clearly, it's not immoral for the decision to be made for a baby to die or to be killed. Even child sacrifices were made all throughout the Old Testament, and it was in favor of God. He took blessing on that. He was okay with that. It is all throughout it and all throughout history outside of the Bible, acts of that towards God. So you could argue that it may not have been your God, but nevertheless, um, and that's after the fact. Uh, to make an argument that abortion or being anti-abortion is biblical is just wrong, because it's not. And you can argue that all you want, but it's just not. So it's just you making a stance and trying to use your religion and Bible as sort of some sort of like, backing for you, but you're using it out of context. You're using it for something that it doesn't say. So, I don't know what to tell you. So yes, I see no reason whatsoever when it comes to the abortion argument, for Roe to have been out of sorts. Like I said, technically Roe gave it to the states too. It just restricted at a certain point, which based on what is it, the 14th Amendment or whatever. That's like the federal. If for things to be put into place on a federal level, when it's an issue where the states might have some sort of extremity in one way or another in restricting rights to its citizens. The federal government can step in with a law or something that prohibits the state in extremes from taking rights away from individuals. And that's what Roe was. It was a federal law to prevent states like red states and stuff like that to literally prevent a right of somebody to have an abortion, in its extremes. It allowed a certain period where it was actually allowed. And then after that, it went to the states on how they decided what to do about medical reasons and, during the second trimester and whatnot. And then, of course, third trimester, it was pretty much banned in most cases. So to argue that, this to removing that just gave it all completely back. Yeah, it gave it all completely back to the states, but Roe still gave it to the states. To argue that it didn't is wrong too. The states still had purview over abortion. It just only after a certain point, because it was, understood that the state shouldn't be able to restrict within a certain point, and a certain extreme point. So that's how I feel about the abortion topic. And why most people politically at this point, when dealing with this topic, realize that Kamala is better on this topic. The Democratic Party as a whole is better on this topic. Because the Republican Party always tends to cater to their most extreme positions, and especially when it comes to the pro-life side, they oftentimes, for some reason, cater there and give a lot of credit to them in decision making around that topic. Uh, Project 2025 wants a complete ban, federal ban. That's what they're striving for. That's what activists are striving for. Now, Trump doesn't appear to really be on board with that, and that's good. But if given the office, is there potential for him to maybe give in to it in order to get something else or something like that? I mean, it's possible. He's given into things before to get something out of it. So that's where that threat lies. You know, even if he does have the rhetoric where he doesn't completely is not on board, and I don't think he's ever been completely on board with that. I think he was accepting of the whole back to the state thing. I don't really think he really had an issue with Roe, honestly, personally, but I think he was okay with it. You know, he thought, oh yeah, I mean, if we just allow it to the states are going to do what they want to be in the people's, you know, in the hands of the people and what they decide, the majority of each state for blah blah blah. That's fine, whatever. Although most of the bans that went into place had absolutely nothing to do with people voting on them, it just happened to do with laws that were already on the books. So how you can even argue that it went back into the hands of the people when the bans that were put in place were on laws that were already on the books from hundreds of years ago in some cases, in the 1800s. We sure shit didn't vote for that. Now, in some certain, you know, these what 4 or 5 states or so that have had votes and stuff on the situation, on abortion and whatnot, all of them have went back, have pulled back from bans, have pulled back and raised the levels, and voted against restrictions. All of them, but you still have several states that do not have those votes on the docket, you know, to be done. The word is escaping me right now what I'm trying to talk about. Like, y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm sorry. I do have that sometimes where I just can't think of a word. It's like the idea is there, but the specific word that would identify that, I just, for some reason, I come to a blank. And I apologize. I know that happens probably more than I would like. But I think you know what I'm talking about. I understand and I have sympathy for those who value life. I value life, but I value all life. But I understand also where life arguably is not. And even according to the Bible, if you're going hardcore in the Bible, even the Bible speaks of life happening once, like the breath of life is put into you. Once someone breathes, life is there. Life is like, you know, even in the creation of the earth, of people, when life was given to Adam, when life was given to Eve, if that's what you want to believe, he breathed the life into them. That's when, at the point that they breathed, that they had life. He didn't have life before that. And that's like a solid argument that technically, to some degree, you can argue that a baby is not alive, is not, you know, does not have life until it breathes on its own outside the womb. Now, I don't completely agree with that. I'm on board that I don't even completely agree with that. Because we know that even some premature babies can, breathe on their own, some, if they're not too premature. But still, even with some assistance, they can breathe to a certain point to get them to their normal, normal time that they should have came out. But I mean, because I feel like if they could be assisted, if they're to the point where they could be assisted to live, then they are alive. If they, I feel like you could argue if they were born at a certain spot, a certain time, where no matter what you did, they were not going to live. Then you could argue there is a line there where are they really alive? If they, even with assistance, they are not going to live, can you actually consider them alive? No. Yeah, there may have been a heartbeat. There may have been, other things while they were in the womb, but I can see where somebody could argue that. I'm not saying that even I believe that, but I'm just saying that I can see where you could argue that though. So, um, but to think that some smudge, you know, that hasn't even formed into anything yet is life on a what? Cellular level, molecular level is, I mean, yeah, I guess you could say scientifically you could argue it's life to some degree. It's a development of life, but still it isn't any kind of form of a being, you know. And how you can argue the soul argument, if you believe in the soul, at what point the soul is there, at what point consciousness starts to maybe develop. I guess you could say that is soul, or you could argue the soul is there, is then is is created at that point. Maybe I don't know. I don't know how you would want to identify the soul being there. But I mean, there's, like I said, there's arguments being made around that, but it certainly isn't from conception. And like I said, the Bible doesn't even argue for that. And it doesn't argue against it either, or against abortion either. So, yeah, that's how I feel about it. I would like to see. I know this is a hard topic. I know this is a controversial topic. I know a lot of people feel real hard about this topic. Uh, but like I'm taking, I'm taking time to at least humor and try and understand the other side. But you just got to understand that for me, that doesn't apply. And I'm okay if it applies to you. I have no problem with that. If you want to accept that, like if you want to decide that you could never have an abortion personally because you feel like the moment that seed was put in you, it was a baby. It was life. It was soul. It was I no problem. You do you boo. You know? That is I have no, and I will support you in that. But try to force other people to have to
to.
accept that for themselves. That. For themselves. 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 For themsel That's like the argument of trying to force religion or a belief system on people that they don't believe in or don't want or don't desire to practice. It shouldn't happen. The same thing. But like I said, I completely support you and you believe in that for you. But for to try to engage in rules and laws and uh, forcing practice or lack thereof for somebody else, making decisions for their life, themselves, for the life of their own child, that's just going too far. So, um, anyways, thank you for joining me. This was a long one, a little bit, but it's an important topic to talk about, and I've been kind of putting it off a little bit. I've been wanting to talk about it, but I've kind of been putting it off a little bit until I felt like it was the best time to speak about it. Uh, but I think it's a big thing when it comes to this campaign or this election. And I think it's going to be very important. And it's clearly been important in previous, in 2020, 22, and, all these, state, uh, votes and stuff that have been going on. I still can't remember. I still can't think of that word. Um, anyways, um, going in the opposite direction, going in, for less restrictions and upholding abortion rights. Uh, it clearly shows that you know the polling that previously and the polling since has incredibly increased. I think before Roe versus Wade was, I mean, there was already like 55, 60% support for Roe. It may have been a little bit more than that, but now it's like 85% support for it. Um, it's this this is just really blowing it up. So, so yeah, I would love for that's where I support someone more in the direction of Harris Walls because at least they are talking about codifying it and making it more back on the federal level for rights so that these, mothers and stuff don't have to face, you know, life changing or life threatening situations in order to, have something happen or having to face, the situation of rape or incest or something like that, some kind of, something that was forced on them and it was out of their control and, being forced to have the child because of that. I think that's just, no. That should, there again, that should lie in your own decision. If someone wants to have a baby, even in that situation, fine. We support you. I give you all the support you need. But if you don't want to bring that child in, I completely understand. So, anyways, thank you for the time. If you like this video, like I said, consider subscribing, like, share, all that good stuff. Let me know what you think about what I've spoke on here. Are you for? Are you against? Pro-life, pro-choice? Do you have nuance in that? Or are you far? Like if you're pro-life, are you like the far right decision, or are you kind of more in the middle on the issue? Like you're pro-life, but you don't want a complete ban, basically. Um, uh, if you're pro-choice, how pro-choice are you? Are you, you understand the Roe concept, or did you even think that was too restrictive? Um, I feel like Roe was pretty much on board. I feel like it was about as good as you can get of like a balance, a almost perfect balance. Pretty much you could almost argue a perfect balance between in this issue, within the whole argument of this issue. I think it was accepting to both directions. whether you felt like somebody that you felt like at your core it should be banned, but or you're somebody who feels like there should be absolutely no restrictions. I feel like that it was a pretty equal down the center medium agreement for somebody's rights and making that decision. So, anyways, I mean, it certainly didn't keep anybody from not having one. It's not like Roe forced you to have an abortion. It didn't do that. It just gave you the option if you wanted it. You know. So, thank you very much again, and yeah, let me know what you think about the whole thing. Let's get a conversation going. Until next time, peace. Clear Talk.